Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we host a roundtable episode where we speak to supervising sound editor Christopher Gomez and re-recording mixers Benny Harold and Andrew Garrett Lange about their work on the second season of Beef. Please be warned that heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with the trio. Hi Chris, hi Penny, hi Andy. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank
Hey
you for
there.
Thank you
having
for having
us.
us.
We're here to talk about the second series of Beef, which has recently come out on Netflix. How have you guys found the reception to the second series?
I find that all of my favorite people really love it. Like all of colleagues whose opinions I really admire and work I really admire and opinions I really value have been so receptive and very complimentary. So it's always exciting to be a part of a project that's kind of popular and people like to watch.
Yeah, same. It's been fun getting to get those text messages from the people that I know of. My nephew texted me a few days after it came out, and has nothing to do with the industry. But he texted me and he's like, "Hey, how did you guys make this one sound for this one part of the show?" Like, how did you guys do that? So the fact that it was like resonating with people in that regards was always fun to see. But yeah, it's been the, like Penny said, some of our favorite people have been like reaching out and just being so complimentary of the show. So it's been a real joy.
Yeah, Chris nailed it. I mean, that's what I was going to say. It's like people text, it's been great having friends text me and wanting to like talk about the different parts of the show. It's been really fun.
I guess it's always like the biggest thing is when you have friends. Like industry people is one thing because I feel like sometimes like they'll have a slightly more keen ear to what you guys are doing and it'll kind of be like, oh, I wonder how they did that. But then I guess once you have friends and family members talk about it and give you a shout out, it's I don't know, it's slightly different. It's like, yes, finally, you understand what I do.
No, they'll never understand what we do.
Which is totally fine. But I think one of the funnest parts has been the conversations that kind of have come up with this season, and getting texts from different people that I know of, like, hey, what do you think this means? I saw there's a symbolism in this, but I'm not really sure. And I'm like, that's so you know our showrunner Sunny is so fantastic about doing that and creating these shows that just get people talking and discussing. And I love that. The more people talk about it, I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's dive into the nuance of what you think this all means.
I think as well, like allowing audiences to do that. I think it just shows the detail of the show, but then also if people go on Reddit or other forums to sort of get their theories, and I feel like you just start creating an accidental community of people who then sort of point things out, but then also you don't notice things, and then at the same time they can give you a new perspective. Like, do you know what? Huh, I actually didn't think about that. I just thought I'll put this sound here and make it just fill out the scene a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's those accidental kind of moments that you mentioned are always the funnest ones, of just like, oh, I never actually thought about that. Or there's just points in the show that you just kind of that you hear people bring up, and you're just like, it's like, oh my gosh, like this totally ran with an idea of like, hey, what is this something? Is that something? And I know I've gotten those conversations with people that I know of, like before, of like, hey, so I noticed this part of it, and I'm just like, oh, that's so fascinating. I would have never, it just, I mean, you objectively, like, or you look at it as like as somebody, as an audience, and you just see it in a completely different light and pick apart different details that you may not have noticed as you're working on it.
Yeah, and I think what's also really fun is that just from working on it, knowing and working with Sunny, knowing just how intentional he is with every single piece of the puzzle. And he, I mean, he touches every part of it. And so watching people have questions and stuff is really fun because another thing that I think Sonny is so great at that you touched on is that he doesn't force feed the audience anything. Like, I think he wants to bring the audience to a level of like thinking about symbolism and the themes of the show and what things mean. And so, yeah, it has spawned a lot of discussion that's been really fun to watch.
And because you all three of you worked on the first series, was there pressure for you guys on the second series coming to it? Because the first series was so popular, sonically, there's quite a lot going on. But I feel like with this series, there's a lot going on, but it feels like it's like pulled back just a little bit because if you go to like the whole sort of with the build up of the first series with the like road rage and how much you can play on that and how much you can play on like the car sounds or like people sort of getting angry whilst you're in a country club, you can really scale back on that sound because you're not going to constantly hear people playing tennis or playing golf because of the exclusivity of it all. Did you find that, yeah, but did you feel like there was more pressure coming back for a second series and topping your work from the previous one?
Definitely, and I'm sure anybody who worked on both seasons probably felt that way. Just there's a lot high expectations and a lot of pressure. I think that's just like a common theme of any show that kind of gets a second season. But for this one being an anthology was so different, and working on season two felt. You're right. The season feels different, and so it felt different working on it as well. And everything needed to be more pulled back, more polished. Andy, I know, can talk about some of the backgrounds and stuff and how he just had to mix with like intention.
Yeah, I mean, the season one was definitely like this kind of grittier, bombastic feel, I feel like. And yeah, this season, country clubs, business class, cabins on planes and fancy health clinics. It's like it's definitely more polished feeling. And but we also, yeah, we definitely played things more subtle and subdued. And then but it's still that kind of stress, anxiety bubbling under the surface. And we had a lot of fun kind of just building scenes, for that explosion of action at the end.
Yeah, and I think just a lot of uh, some of the pressure was just how do we make the show feel as immersive as we did with season one, with, as I said, dialing back some of these sounds and it being an anthology series, the fact that we don't get to rely on, the sounds that we crafted for season one. We're not bringing those back. It's like, all right, we're starting from scratch. Let's do this all over again. So just the natural inherent pressure of, having to build a full soundscape, with a fresh slate. It was both exciting and, it's as anyone will tell you, it's exciting and daunting at the same time of like, all right, how are we going to do this again?
Yeah, like having a fresh slate, you can play around a bit more, but I guess you don't have that safety blanket of, oh yeah, we can reuse something from episode three in season one to help us like build around certain sets, which I always feel like you're giving it's like you kind of like not cheating, but giving yourself like a good stepping stone to be like, if we would nail it now, I don't have to worry about it for the next how many seasons this show goes on for. But here, yeah, you just have a daunting like, oh, what can we do here? But then I guess it gets the creative ideas flowing and how you can play around with things and how you could also make it sound differently as well, because I feel like the scope of the show is a lot bigger this series, not just basing it in America, but also in South Korea as well, where, if certain people haven't ever traveled there, you don't know how that sounds. So I guess you have to create that world for the audience as well of what it's going to be like. And I think visually we see it with like the seasonal pastels, but I think with the sound, it's slightly different and has to be a lot crisper. And especially there's certain episodes where you kind of change the tone. So the hospital episode, I think that's episode four, where I feel like that exclusivity has to be flipped on its head. So you're going to be constantly hearing sound. There's people who probably be groaning in the background or just, yeah, a lot of chaos and, yeah, disorder that you need to play around with it. And when you go into an episode like that, where do you begin with thinking of how an is going to sound and how the waiting room is going to sound? Because let's be honest, like hospitals are so horrible, but you've managed to capture it in a way where you just think like, I don't want to be here whatsoever.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That was kind of the theme of going into it, of just this really anxiety inducing area where you're just like, I need to get out of this area. I need to get out of this hospital. And that was a lot of, that began with the discussions with our picture editor, Laura and Lily, and, and then more so discussing with, our showrunner, Sunny. But it was very much like that was the theme, chasing of just like when you're in there, it's like, how do you, because you're not trying to bombard the audience with sound for the sake of bombarding them. It's like, how do we, place these moments, and how do we build this so that way you do feel uncomfortable and uneasy the entire way? And so like you're just by the time the episode ends, you're just like, oh, thank God I'm out of this. So yeah, a lot of that began with like just discussions with them and like how to shape it and build it into what it became.
Yeah, Chris and his team added all these great little textures that are kind of woven throughout the episode. Like there's groaning and screaming, and there's some details of it. Like one of my favorite discussions I've read on Reddit, it's like, what's the deal with that lady's voice? Once Ashley's actually admitted, and that's based on somebody's actual experience. It's one of those things where like you kind of, it's fiction is stranger than reality, and or reality is stranger than fiction. There we go. So yeah, and he's right. So we didn't want to bombard people with it. Like we had to kind of be subtle because the episode also just had to grow and expand into like that final moment when Ashley enters the wormhole.
I think as well, like with something like that, um, it's right to build it up rather than, I guess, go at like 100, especially there where, especially with like, because like visually it's very, like very different. But I guess if you have it turned up to 100 with the sound, I feel like you're just as an audience, you just will get a headache from it all. And it's like that's not what you really want when you're trying to enjoy an episode of TV. But whilst you're sort of gradually building it and building it, I think there's something with like the heart monitor with the beep of that as well, and how like the like how it's sort of like pitch and tone of it because I think if you've watched enough like medical dramas or even if you've been to hospital, you hear that beeping and it's if there's somebody flatlines, it's not very good. But when you have something there, do you think about like the tone and pitch of something like that? Because it is something that can if it's a bit too high pitched, then it can sort of discombobulate the audience.
Yeah, I think we definitely tried to make everything kind of rooted in reality, and then bend it as time kind of goes on, and like the stress builds in these scenes. And that particular moment that Penny mentioned as Ashley's being put under for the surgery and we go through this like wormhole, that was like a really fun moment for me because we got to really feature that heart monitor beeping that kind of like carried us into that black. And our sound editor, Jerry LaFuente, he had kind of given me some pitched versions of it. And so I actually repitched some of it to kind of match the key of the music and then use the heart monitor to kind of be the last thing that we hear as it fades into black, and kind of reverb it out into the black. That was a really fun moment.
And I guess as well, you can play, even though you got the visual, you got that sound as well to play around and allow audiences to sort of feel like they're getting pulled into the wormhole. It's kind of like something similar to like in Nope when they're getting pulled through like the alien stomach
Right.
and how it's sort of you hear the screen sort of like coming in and out of it all. Yeah, it's really you think about it, it's quite simple, but it's probably quite a lot of hard work, but it's so clever at the same time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That sequence alone, that sequence alone from like the moment Austin spots the like vending machine full of red Gatorade and up until like the wormhole, probably I don't know, we probably spent at least just a day on that by itself. because we kept refining it, and the score is so good underneath. But there's a point where so much is happening that, you know, parts of like really important beats of the score start to get kind of hidden or masked. And so I would have to, you know, kind of, I'm the dialogue and music mixer, so I would write the stems of the score a little bit so we hear all the important beats and kind of EQ things or tame things and other stems of the score that were maybe clashing with things Andy was doing as the sound effects mixer. And yeah, it took a lot of finessing, because once you have a sequence where you're just really using all of the tools in your toolbox as far as like, you know, music, dialogue, and sound effects working together, it takes a lot of work to really refine and make it so that all the important things stand out and all the clashing things are kind of brought back.
And just sorry, out of curiosity, Penny, because you're mentioning that you're working with the score and also the sound. Do you find, how do you balance that in your workday? Because I feel like you're kind of like the person in between being pulled within a tug of war of like the, oh no, you have to look after the composed music side. No, 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 you need to look after the sound side. And then you're kind of in stuck in the middle. It's like, oh, who's going to prioritize who? How do you go about prioritizing which, you know, the score or the sound of the scene?
For me, so Andy and I work together. We mix together. We're mixing partners, and I think for both of us, the answer is just what serves the story. As long as you keep serving the story as your North Star, you will always be good. And as long as like you share instincts, you know, with your director or your showrunner, you're at least going in the right direction. So it's just a matter of like feeling it out, you know, and there's a give and take to it. And sometimes, you know, the score being this like emotional anchor of a scene or of a show, you know, once the score is introduced, Andy will kind of work with me and kind of like bring down some of his like backgrounds or kind of things that aren't serving us right then, and give the score room to kind of grow and tell the story it's trying to tell. And similarly, like in the one shot in the finale, the like the fight scene, the fun oneer they did, um, the music is all extremely percussive and heavy and driving it, but Andy's sound effects are telling us the bigger story there, and his sound effects have to cut through as well. So it's just a little bit of bobbing and weaving, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah, and especially on a show like this where the soundtrack, I don't want to say it's like overbearing, but you really notice it there, but it's beautiful at the same time. And I was like, that was the first thing I was thinking. I was like, how are they managing to juggle between the two and like not one having overpowering the other? And it's just, yeah, it feels very seamless. And especially like with TV, where especially Netflix as well, because you can watch it on your TV, on your phone. I'm sure somebody could probably hack into their Apple Watch and watch it on their watch as well. And there's probably so much like sound going on. Do you guys ever worry that because there's so many different ways that somebody can watch the show, that you need to configure the sound just slightly different to how it might be on in the cinema, for example?
Yeah,
Every day.
that's a big part of our job, is to, you know, kind of account for all these different environments that people can listen on. And, you know, we're mixing in this amazing, you know, mix stage, you know, theater, but we have different speaker configurations we can check while we're, you know, mixing a scene. So we can just pop it into stereo, you know, put it on smaller speakers. And for this show, actually, well, I personally bought a very low quality sound bar just to set up, and we can pop something onto the sound bar there and hear how this scene sounds, you know, just to try to like, hey, somebody might out there might be listening this way. Let's check how it's going to sound on there. So you
And
Yeah,
never
you
know how
hit.
people are listening, you know, like people could have their dishwashers going, their washer and dryer going. You have to kind of just try to keep things you can be subtle, but you can't be too subtle with TV. You know what I mean?
And this is something that we discussed even back in season one with Sunny a lot, was just how it will translate to these other formats. And it was something he was very mindful of, having his check. And he would go home and he'd listen to it on his, different systems, headphones, his personal speakers, and then come back and be like, hey, I noticed that this and this and this kind of, stood out a little bit. Let's maybe readjust this. So it was a constant evolving conversation with him to try to be as mindful as we can. Obviously, time permitting, we could only do so much, but it was very much like always on the back of everyone's minds of like making sure that this would translate really well into all the possible formats that you can think of.
Right. And one thing Sunny really wanted out of season two that was different from season one also was just a more dynamic dialogue mix. And by that, I just mean the quiet stuff's quieter and the louder stuff's louder. It's more of kind of a theatrical style of mixing in general, and not having the dialogue sitting super up front like a television mix. And so that was a challenge, and that was why one reason why Andy bought that really bad soundbar was just to constantly check. And Sunny also had like a very specific like tone in mind for the dialogue, like a really clean tone where nothing's muddy, nothing's abrasive. And so I think we kind of found that when you're chasing a tone and when you're given time to find it, your quieter stuff, it sits fine if you're hearing all the right parts of it. So yeah, I'm really proud of the dialogue mix we got out of season two as well.
Um, just following on from with the dialogue mix and the tone of it, um, do you find that a lot of it can be sort of found in the actor's performance, but then how much work goes in on your side trying to potentially clean up their performances, or if they're spoken too low, or the levels are a bit too high whilst they were shooting?
Yeah, I mean, the theme of this season was to honor their performances, and Chris and his team did a really great job of just like they're it's really an art when it comes to dialogue editing of like what you leave in to the tracks, like because there's such a thing as cleaning up too much. Sonny would say sometimes like this part's sounding good, but I'm missing the comedy. And what that would usually mean is like, oh, there's like price of mouth clicks maybe that we took out because we thought, oh, those, or I don't know, grating or don't sound pleasant, and he wanted them back. So it was, as far as dialogue editing goes, it was like the game was like leave as much in as possible, don't clean it up too much. And then as far as like my mixing process goes, I wish I could say like it was just because we wanted to honor the performances. It was like set the level and never touch it, but that's not quite that simple, because he was chasing this tone. So it was just a matter of like constantly just EQing and adjusting syllable by syllable. I mean, we went through that mix syllable by syllable. It was a pretty unique experience in that regard because not every director or showrunner is that focused on it. But for him, the performances were the key to the whole thing, and he really wanted to honor them.
Yeah, there was so much nuance in every single person's performances that we wanted to make sure we kept everything, every little breath, every little click, every little movement. Like, let's keep all of it in there because it was all serving, its own specific purpose. So, and thankfully, because Sunny was so mindful of that, it was just, that I think Penny has said it before, he's very much our guiding light with all this of like what it is that we're chasing. But it is, it was trying to, just as she said, just trying to leave as much as we can and just making sure that we're, what they did on the day is we're preserving it to the best that we can, while also just the balancing act, like you said, of just like the music and the sound effects and everything else happening all at the same time.
It's quite fascinating to hear about like how much you'll be working with syllable for syllable by syllable. I probably do that on an extremely small scale when it comes to editing a podcast. It's like slightly different compared to like you guys, but yeah, it's insane the detail of it, and thinking that even hearing like a syllable that might be slightly off or click that might be slightly off, and being like, no, keep it in. We need to make it authentic and be true to what we're seeing in their performance as well. You would think it'd be the other way around to make it as perfect as possible, but it's like, no, you need to keep that sort of rough and ready side of things as well.
Right.
Yeah. And the bullseye for that is probably like this small.
Tiny. It's a pinhole.
It's a pinhole of a bullseye, but it's something I think we're all very proud of, feeling like we hit that bullseye.
But that's still crazy, like just syllable by syllable, man.
Maybe that's an embellishment. That's
Yes.
an embellishment.
Yeah,
Some-
of course.
yeah,
Of course.
Some
yeah.
scenes.
Some scenes they were like that, but not every scene.
Yeah,
No,
well, and it was to that point, one of the early discussions that we had with Sunny going into this season was just, we are going to make sure we left no stone unturned, where we wanted to make sure that by the end, like, we all knew that this is the best version of what we've been able to accomplish. It was just constantly like it was pushing ourselves and everybody creatively. And the great part was the team that we had collectively. You talked about how we were able to kind of balance between all the different elements, and a lot of it was just because there really wasn't, like, it was never an ego problem when we were putting everything together. It was very much everybody working on the same page of like, hey, what's working for this scene? Is the music working? Great. Let's pull that up a bit. Let's maybe dial back to sound effects. But also, if there was parts where the music was maybe, just pushing a little bit too far, it's like, hey, let's dial that back, and, between, the three of us, our picture editors, our music editor, Luke, and, Phineas and everybody else, it was really a collective effort to try to find how to make everything work seamlessly with one another, which was, it's always so, it's always nice to be able to have that, to be able to have everybody working on the same page of like, firing on the same cylinders as much as we can.
Yeah, 100%. And I think once you get your team together and understand what is needed, you could all pull in the same direction, but then also adding your own spice to the stew as well, because it's all well and good following someone's instructions, but you're also creatives and you need to be able to put your sort of style and flair into it as well. But then also you don't want to overshadow somebody else's work on it as well, which I can imagine is a very tight rope to balance on, especially when I think we could all agree that sometimes people might not appreciate sound as much or understand sound as much because you don't see it like a cut or performance. So you kind of have to make it obvious but not obvious at the same time. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
If we're doing our job right, then people aren't thinking about the sound while they're watching it.
Yeah, which is insane. But then at the same time, a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, so yeah, exactly like that. What I wanted to ask as well is when you're working on, say, a rough cut or maybe close to a picture lock for an episode, um, are there times where your sound design might change how a scene plays out or how they might go back and look at the edit and maybe just tweak it a little bit? And how does those sort of things come about and how do you discuss it with editors and Sunny himself?
Because we work in television, that generally, we are very lucky that we generally will get the locked cut as our, the main version that we're running with. So, and a lot of that is just based on just, the time and scheduling. If we need to jump on earlier cuts, we will. But for the most part, once we receive that version of it, it's pretty much, it's going to stay the way it is. But, and before that, there will be discussions where, I'll get, I'll have conversations or I'll, get requests from picture editors of like, hey, we're looking for this, and this, and maybe even, I've done it before with projects where you build out a scene and send it back to them. And it's like, okay, great. They've kind of take that as, their temp and they'll run with it. So it just, it varies like project by project, but for this one in particular, I think most everything we got, guys correct me if I'm wrong. I think we did have some picture changes, but they weren't super drastic, once we got into like the late phases of the mix.
There are moments where Sonny and Jake Schreier, the director for a few episodes, wish they could change picture. Not once they heard it on the mix stage, but the schedule wouldn't allow for it. But I think, yeah, Sonny was so much more hands-on in a lot of aspects. A lot of parts of our workflow this season, where he was like, "Wow, if I had known that this was going to be the way it was, I would have done the picture differently." And then, well, you could hire a singer.
Yeah, it just TV schedules are so compressed. Like we don't have a lot of times we don't have the luxury of like with the feature film you can sit on it with months on end, kind of refining it with picture editors. With us, it's really is a lot of times you kind of hit the ground running. Anything super complicated, you may have those discussions, but for the most part, it really is. We get it and we run with it as best as we can.
Yeah, I think as well, like, I bet you at the end of the process, whoever the post supervisor is or a producer would be like, huh, could have used an extra 3 more weeks there, guys. And it's just like, yeah, we could have, could have
Every
had that extra
time.
three,
Every time.
those extra 3 weeks of prep or whatever to help out. But even with like TV, it's amazing how quickly like episodes get shot, and how much prep people have. I think I was talking to someone from the latest series of Scrubs, and I think they had 5 days prep and then 5 days shoot. And you just think, like, that's really intense. But what's the post process going to be like as well? Like, I would dread to think like that stress as well. But how do you guys manage your stress levels and help yourself unwind at the end of the day? Because if it's so sort of thick and fast, there must be ways where you could just like, cut out the noise of it all. Pardon the pun.
Sometimes I just drive home in total silence.
Yes, that's a great.
After
what I do too.
after a very loud day on the mix stage, like, on the way to work, I'm like listening to music and amped up. On the way home, it's like everything off.
Yeah, let's just have some silence.
Disassociate.
Your brain off. Exactly. Go home, play some video games.
Fair enough. Well, I guess if you work in sound all day, you kind of need that, just like that tone, the humming of your car, maybe the windscreen wipers as well. You're just like, I can't listen to this anymore. I can't do this.
Yeah. Your ears get tired. It's a real thing.
They do. And sometimes you come back the next day and you listen to something you were doing at the end of the previous day and you're like, oh, I can tell my ears were a little tired.
Right.
So you just adjust for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's just funny, isn't it? That like you're so used to using your ears all day while somebody could be using their eyes, but you can't just turn off your ears. You can close your eyes, put like eye drops in, but with ears, I don't know, you have to be so careful with them as well.
Definitely.
Earplugs are the eye drops of ears, I think, maybe.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
I try not to be offended when Penny puts earplugs in when I'm mixing a very loud sound effects moment. She's just trying to protect her ears,
Oh, there's
Smart.
a very strong hint. Who knows?
And I get the luxury of wearing headphones all day on the stage, so I can just tune them all out as I need to.
Yeah, Chris could teach a master class in ignoring us. So
Yeah.
As long as he signs those timesheets in overtime, then I think we're okay, right? We're okay. Just to hit my final question, because I think I might have gone over time, so apologies. What was your favorite scene to work on?
who wants to go first?
Oh, go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead.
I think that final big fight scene in episode 8 for me, just panning everything, getting all the departments working together, and just using sound to tell that story that our characters are just kind of accidentally, being really good at fighting. And, Ashley's pathetic hammer hits, like, it was a very fun sequence. to move through together, and you really use sound to tell that story.
Right, yeah. That scene took so much precision and coordination between Chris, Andy, and myself. So that was a really special one. And then after that, like the kiss
Mm-hmm.
for Josh and Lindsay at the end under Phineas's score was a really beautiful moment. That was really fun to craft. And man, that thing was so loud on the mix stage. It was awesome. It felt so powerful. And it felt powerful at home too. It was nice to see that translate. But then just like that whole kind of epilogue of the series was fun because, you know, this idea, this theme of like the wheel of samsara, and we're all kind of like stuck in this pattern. And so, you know, first seeing Ashley like in Josh's place, and Andy and I got to use like as much automation, as much as our work from episode one, introducing that into that shot. So that was kind of fun to like call that back. And then the top shot was really cool. That was something that came together kind of last minute. And our picture editor Laura did a great job like finding some pieces of dialogue to hear that we build from, but then Chris had to like search through dailies and sound libraries and create this like build of voices. And it's just that's another fun moment because in addition to there's a needle drop, Phoenix, Love Like a Sunset, but there's also Phineas has composed the score that plays underneath like that whole thing that just builds along with it. And so having crafting that with Sunny and Jake probably on one of our last days mixing and trying to figure out how it went was like a really fun collaborative process. And I think it sounds great.
I'm going to take it all the way back to the beginning of the show and say that I think one of my, one of the parts that I'm most proud of that we all did was just that fight, the fight that propels season 2, similar to the car chase in season 1 of like, this is the moment that sets off the domino effect of what the whole season becomes. The fight sequence with, the entire cold open of that first episode, it's just this long, the slow burn was, one of those themes for this season of, how you said, how do you like not bombard audiences with just a bunch of sounds? And a lot of it is just this progression and just this build up, and for me, it was just like from that moment of that first shot, with the ants up until the outburst of them fighting. And then just, it was so like, I felt like it took so much time and detail, but that the fight in particular between them, because that was we spent a lot of time with that one as well, crafting it and, really, because it needed to have that impact of just like, holy crap, what did we just witness? And it was just, we took different stabs at, where to hit the big crashes and hearing, Josh and Lindsay and, Oscar and Carrie just screaming off camera, and how much of that do we build up into it, and how big do we want to be when we're actually in that moment with them, and just the the relief at the end of it of just you hear the the young couple just, and then just their footsteps running away, which always cracks me up, but it was just like that whole sequence of it. I'm so proud of the way that came out, because I'm like, if we didn't get that right, the rest of the season would have been just would have been a real struggle, but we worked over and over and got that, to, I think, I'm so proud of the way that whole sequence ended up coming out.
All of them are solid choices. I think it's great that you've got like a array of them. I do like Chris's choice regarding like the startup of it all, because yeah, you're right. If you mess that up, then what are you gonna do next? How are you gonna keep the audiences engaged with it all? Because it could be just like a normal domestic where people just arguing and they're just voices raised, but then you have that addition of like the smashing, the crashing and whatnot, and you think, oh, this is serious. Then you see the golf club and it's like, yikes, this is not good. And then I guess you could play around with it a bit more, because once it's filmed on a cell phone, you could play with that sound and make it distort or make it sound worse, because just because of the distance that they might be from the door as well. or it could even pick up the crashing a bit more and have fun with it. And then I guess with the fighting as well, yeah, you can probably have so much fun with it because it's a oneer, but then you don't want to go over the top of it like an action film or whatever, so that it just takes you out of what like how the show actually is. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, no, all very solid choices.
Thank you.
Cool.
It's a lot. It's a, you know, I mean, I think I I'm proud of the entire series, you know, and how this entire season came about. You know, it makes it very hard to like. It's like, what is the one moment? Because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, there's so many. There's so many. You know, it's just like I think collectively as a whole, it's just something that, you know, just so proud of the way it shaped up and turned out, and you know, it's like every Penny, you know, mentioned it earlier. It's like we've really just every little beat and every little detail was so meticulously crafted. And I'm so proud of, you know, it was, I mean, it was, listen, personally, it was a joy to getting to work alongside, you know, them too. And, you know, it always is. So
I'm sure those guys.
Likewise.
I'm sure we're about to Venmo each other $50 for saying such nice things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we worked with Chris on quite a few projects now, and it's always a joy. We have a very, I call it a comfortable collaboration, and no egos in the room, and all just working together to serve the story. So it's a great team.
Yes, and that's what you want to hear though, right? Like when you're working together, and also it's like a joy coming in. It's nothing worse than putting up in your car to go to work and letting out a loud like air of breath, being like, "Here we go again. Let's
Right.
yeah,
let's deal with
yeah.
how loud Andy likes to pay his sound makes."
There we go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just go back to the fact that we don't like, there's just not a whole lot of egos. It's like, we're not afraid to let one another. And like, you know, we discuss very openly different ideas with one another. And there is, you know, there is that comfort zone between, I think, the three of us that we feel comfortable around one another to share like, hey, you know, what do you think about this? Or, you know, bounce ideas off of one another. Which is always so really, you know, it's refreshing, or just, it's just a joy to, you know, get to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and having that as well, there's like you're probably open to ideas more and letting people sort of run with things compared to like if you were a new team and you not 100%, I don't want to say comfortable, but 100% on board with one another. But yeah, but then it shows in the work as well and allows you guys to do what you need to do and work your magic.
But we
Um,
hope.
Chris, Penny, Andy, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for
Robert.
having us. It was a
Yeah.
joy.
Phew, I'm glad that you said that before. I can just send me your just message me your Venmo, please. Beef season 2 is streaming now on Netflix. Go out and hear everybody's amazing work. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys take care and bye bye now. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.